What's up guys, Matt here coming to you from Laidlaw S Harley-Davidson. So today we're going to be doing another brand new 2025 model year bike review. One of my personal favorites, the Low Rider S. So Harley has done some pretty cool stuff to all the Softails this year, but I think the Low Rider S and Low Rider ST kind of got what I personally feel like are some of the best upgrades. The high output 117 motor. So it's basically like the equivalent of like a stage 2 cam last year. So favors that little bit higher rev range. So probably the 3,500 to 4,500 RPM rev range, I'm guessing. We're gonna take the bike out, we're gonna test it a little bit. Got a really cool color that we're reviewing as well, the Iron Horse Metallic, probably my favorite color of the 25 model year. Of course, you got the new electrical architecture on the bike this year. So that's going to give you your tire pressure monitoring, your ride modes, all your LED lighting all around. And you got, things like new switch housings and everything to accommodate this new electrical architecture. Today also, big upgrade on cameras as well. We are filming on the Insta360 Ace Pro 2. So really pumped about these action cams. I've been shooting action cams for about 15 years now. I've tried pretty much everything. And so far, what I've seen and what I've read on these Insta360s, they're pretty dang nice. So stoked to be filming on an Insta360. Let me know, guys, for those of you who have been watching my videos for a long time, let me know if you like the roller footage on these Insta360s. Obviously, action cams are instrumental to the type of video work that I do. I've got over 500 videos, and most all of them involve action cam work. So let me know if you like the quality of the footage on this Insta360. All right guys, so let's talk 2025 model year Low Rider S. So this is one of those bikes that I always look forward to every year. I think a lot of people look forward to it every year just because it is such a popular motorcycle. This bike's kind of getting to the point where Harley-Davidson is making what I feel like is the perfect mid-size cruiser, to a point where it's almost taking away from the attention and sales of other bikes. Maybe that's just because I kind of prefer this style in Southern California. I think a lot of riders prefer this style, so maybe that's a different scenario in other parts of the country. But when Harley-Davidson first introduced this halfway through the 16 model year on the Dyna chassis, the Low Rider S, the world erupted. It was a runaway hit for a lot of different riders. It's what a lot of people had been asking for a long time. And you have all the DNA dating all the way back to the Super Glide that Willie G came out with in the early 70s. And you still retain a lot of the DNA of the FXR era in the early 80s. And a lot of what was kind of perpetuated through the Dyna line through many years as well. And then you combine that with the new Softail frame that was launched in the 2018 model year. And you have a bike that I feel like has just kind of been perfected over a long period of time, that has a lot of the styling characteristics that are quintessential factory custom or factory experimental FX, as Willie G called it back in the early 70s. And so we're here now today with a bike that hits a lot of really good style points. The blacked outs, engine, forks, all the trim on the metal pieces and everything. There's just a lot of cool things that have been updated this year, and there's just a lot of updates that have been applied to the Low Rider S in recent years. So we have a new electrical architecture on this bike. It's very similar to the electrical architecture that was first introduced on the Pan America and then was introduced to the touring bikes, the Road Glide and the Street Glide last year in 24. And now we're seeing that in all the Softails across the line.
What's up everybody? I'm Nick from Laidlaw S Harley-Davidson, as you probably already know, but if it's your first time here and you're looking to see a review of the updated 2025 Low Rider S, then welcome to the channel. This right here is what I just said. It's the updated 2025 Low Rider S, and it was a bit of a surprise to me that it got updated at all this year, only because the bike was wholly brand new in 2020, and then in 2022 it received some additional updates, a larger engine, revised gauge, traction control, that kind of stuff. And then now we're 2025, so relatively short turnaround, and it's getting updated again. And so let's run through the refresh so far. So biggest changes are going to be to the engine. So you now have the 117 high output. It's the same displacement as before, but dramatically more horsepower. We're talking 15, 16, 17% more horsepower. You're now up into the mid 110 horsepower range. So you're like 114, 115 horsepower right out of the box. And that was achieved by going to a stage 2 cam. So in Harley-Davidson's P&A catalog, there's a Screaming Eagle stage 2 cam that gets you more horsepower, more torque, and that is from the factory now in this bike, which is amazing because one, it's a terrific value add, and two, it's something that in California, it's been difficult for us to get actually. So that's a side issue, in California specific, but that means you can now basically get a cammed bike out of the box. There are some other changes though that are really, really nice to have as well. Something I've been crying for a long time is to have the Low Rider S come standard with a 2-into-1 exhaust. The first thing that most Low Rider S owners do is rip off the stock pipe and put a 2-into-1 on it, and now it comes from the factory like that. And the really cool thing about it is that the cat is in the header. So that means if all you really want is a bit more sound in the look of a 2-into-1, you're just a muffler swap away from that. But it doesn't stop with the engine and the exhaust. Harley's also gone around and done LED lighting all the way around the bike, which is a really nice update to see. It already had an LED headlight, what they call reflector daymaker up front, which is a really potent headlight, and it has a really nice kind of signature LED ring that gives the bike a really distinctive look from the front. But they've gone and kind of matched that distinctive look in the rear. So we now have a LED taillight. It had an LED taillight previously, but it was more of like kind of a first generation LED. So you could see all the individual lights. And now it's got a unique design with a signature light that's going to make it more recognizable at night, which is awesome. Something that I really wanted. And a little nitpick for me is that the Low Rider S always came with kind of a chrome trim. Despite being an all blacked out bike, it was chrome trim around the previous generation taillight, and now it's all blacked out. So another win for Harley. One of the other changes they made for 2025 is they revised the hand control setup. So for, I don't know, decades now, Harley's had the same hand controls, but as they've moved more and more bikes over to a more advanced rider aid package, RDRS, and in this case, you get the full rider suite with a 6-axis IMU, which is, again, new for 2025. They've had to modify their hand controls to allow for that additional functionality. And so we get all new hand controls. Of course, that does mean that cruise control is still standard, and it's actually standard across the entire Softail range for the first time, which is really, really nice. But you have your mode button, which lets you set the different rider modes. They have different profiles: rain, road, and sport. They're pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, sport if you want to go fast, rain if there's water falling from the sky, and road if you're just cruising. There's a number of other smaller revisions that have taken place for the Milwaukee-Eight, specific to the engine. I know I mentioned its cam. It also now has a new intake. So the intake manifold has returned to aluminum. It was previously plastic. They've gone back to aluminum. So that should be a nice performance increase and durability increase, which is something I always celebrate. One of the other really nice features of the rider suite, in addition to the 6-axis IMU, so you've got the lean sensitive traction control, the lean sensitive ABS, which are obviously really, really nice to have, is you've got tire pressure monitoring. It's something that I really appreciate having. I don't like getting on my hands and knees and checking the tire pressure, or having to roll the bike forward and back to get the valve at the right angle so that I can check the tire pressure, only to find out that my tire pressure is fine. So it's nice to be able to pull it up on the display. Not as a big a deal like as the baggers, where it's even more annoying when it's stuck behind saddlebags, but still a really, really nice feature to have, and I'm glad that Harley-Davidson included it. So those are the things that are new for 2025. But basically, if you're just coming to this bike clean slate, this is Harley-Davidson's middleweight performance muscle cruiser. Okay, so this is going to have its most potent engine for the Softail family. So this is the 117 high output. There are two other engine options for the Softail range, but this is going to be the most potent. You've got dual disc brakes, you've got high quality Showa suspension inverted in the front, and it's a monoshock underneath the seat for the rear suspension. And the Softail frame was redesigned originally back in 2018. It featured a lighter weight, a stiffer frame, and better suspension geometry compared to the Dyna and the other previous middleweight frames that Harley had produced, like the FXR that came before it, although it's technically heavier than the FXR frame, or at least this bike is heavier than most FXRs, but it's kind of hard to compare because this has a 5-gallon tank and larger wheels, tires, bigger brakes, so it's not really an apples to apples comparison. But at least compared to like the Dyna Low Rider S, this right here is going to be lighter, stiffer, and have better suspension geometry. And then Harley has just continuously iterated on it, as I mentioned earlier, since they relaunched the Low Rider S in 2020. It's seen pretty significant improvements over the last 5 model years. I have personally owned a number of Softails. If you watch the channel, you've seen my 2018 Low Rider that I had a Stage 4 114 in. I had a Softail Slim, and then I had a 2021 Low Rider S that I had just a few modifications, mostly ergonomics and related to doing longer trips. So I had the saddlebags off of the ST model, for example. I was actually really blown away by the stock power of this bike. I'm not someone who's unfamiliar with pretty potent bikes. As I mentioned, my 2018 Low Rider was a Stage 4, but this, it's hard to compare. Definitely feels nearly as quick as that bike in stock trim, and it's hard to gauge with the stock pipe because you never know how much that additional noise is adding to the experience of and the sensation of speed. But it's remarkably quick. It really comes alive above 3,000 RPM. And as much as I was trying to focus on everything else during the ride, I actually kind of struggled to think about the updated suspension or to think about the hand controls or think about anything else other than the engine, because it really dominated the experience. And I think that that's something that's kind of quintessential to this style of bike. You want the engine to be something that really dominates the experience, because when you buy a bike like this, a big reason that you're buying it is the motor. The Milwaukee-Eight has got so much personality, so much charm, and so much power that it really, it just steals your heart. You know, it makes you love the bike. It makes you feel like the bike is alive. And the Stage 2 cam that comes from the factory in this, it just takes what was already a really characterful, really potent motor and just ratchets it up past that. So I was taken aback. It was honestly distracting from every other positive change that had been made on the bike, but in the best kind of way. I forgot about everything I was supposed to be doing and was just kind of giggling in my helmet. I did force myself to think about some of the other stuff, and the suspension feels a lot better than my 2021 and certainly than my 2018 felt. My 2018 did not have the inverted front end. That was something that I had always wanted on that bike. My 2021 had the inverted front end, but since then they've revised the suspension, and it just feels like it handles the sharper bumps, the larger bumps better. I always felt like on my 2021, if you hit something that was really abrupt, like a pothole or something that was really testing the suspension's ability to absorb something really quickly, that it struggled a little bit with that. And this feels remarkably better in that department specifically. My bike also didn't come with the taller rear shock that this now comes with, and that helps a lot with the ride height and with the overall suspension comfort. I don't feel like it's way too stiff. Handling dynamics of the bike have always been really, really good, and they continue to be really, really good. You've got the 28-degree front end on this bike. As I mentioned, the frame is lighter and stiffer than the previous generation frames that were offered by Harley, and both of those translate to improved handling dynamics. This is something that ripping around on a canyon road is really rewarding. It's just a really fulfilling ride, and for those who are traveling solo and really appreciate a good twisty road, I would honestly say that this, or maybe the Low Rider ST, is something that you would want to strongly consider over a bagger, just because of how fun these are on that kind of road. Not to say that the baggers aren't fun or dynamically great, especially with the 2024 updates, but there's just a little bit of an edge that you get from a bike that's 100 and so pounds lighter than those bikes are. That is just a kind of an unfair advantage. And that 28-degree front end also helps sharpen up the handling a little bit. And then the more aggressive riding position with the mid controls and these bars that put you in just the slightest lean are also really conducive to having a good time on a canyon road. So I touched a little bit on the ergonomics, but I want to say that for someone like me at 5'9" on a good day, this is really actually pretty well suited to my frame. As you see in the video, I'm not super cramped. I don't feel like I'm having to reach for the bars or anything like that. Oddly enough, I might actually prefer the Fat Bob style controls. So they're not like what I would consider like a forward that you might have had on like a Dyna or like a previous generation Softail, where they're like way out there. They're only just a little bit further out. I actually might prefer those slightly, but the mid controls do a great job of getting your weight kind of underneath you and just giving you a lot of control and feeling like you're in a sportier riding position. And so I definitely appreciate why that was done. Of course, if you are someone who's a little bit taller, I wouldn't shy away from this bike just because it has the mid controls from the factory. You can put forward controls on it, and like I said, they're not way out there, and it doesn't completely take away from the sporty ride of the bike or the sporty character of the bike when you do that conversion. The Fat Bob was a plenty sporty bike even with those controls on it, and this would be as well.
The two things that were the most important to me this year that I really wanted to feel for myself on the test ride was, one, this high output motor. We have 3 variations of the 117 Milwaukee-Eight this year in the Softail lineup. Honestly, I felt like, okay, it's gonna be a little bit different I was expecting it to be very minor, like maybe you have to ride the bikes back to back to feel it, but that was not the case at all. This definitely feels like a cammed bike, as you know, we call it in the hot rod world. I've ridden a lot of stock Harley-Davidsons over the years, and I wouldn't say they all feel the same, but a Milwaukee-Eight, for the most part, you know, you have varying power depending on the displacement, and this is a good size 117 cubic inch motor. I had it in sport mode probably 90% of the time on the test ride, and it definitely felt like there had been like aftermarket work done to it, or Screaming Eagle parts work done to this bike. Right away, you could tell this bike wanted to be in the higher RPM range. It's a bike that wants to be at least 3,500 RPM when you're at kind of the mid-range of the power, and you spin that throttle and it continues to gain power, pull harder and harder as you get up to red line. I didn't take it to red line, but you can tell this is a bike that just likes to be revved out. And I have a CVO Road Glide ST, which also has an engine that's labeled a high output. It's the 121 high output motor. And the 121, you know, we're talking about 4 cubic inches greater, and it does feel like it has more power, although the Road Glide is about 130, 140 pounds heavier. And you can still tell that it has more power, which I hope it does for a CVO and a 121 motor. At a 117 in sport mode with this cam, this thing is putting out some pretty dang good, impressive numbers for an air-cooled V-twin. I don't think Harley-Davidson has ever had this powerful of an engine in a mid-sized cruiser before. But you know, another thing that I kind of reiterated in my mind is I'm glad Harley-Davidson didn't just put this most powerful motor in all of their bikes. Because I know a lot of people are gonna say like, oh, you know what, if I buy the Street Bob or if I buy the Heritage, I'm making a compromise on the engine. Those 117s in the Street Bob and the Heritage are still powerful engines. It's just that, yes, you don't have that peak horsepower that this bike has and the Low Rider ST has, but you have to ride this bike in such a manner that a lot of people riding a cruiser, especially a classic cruiser, probably don't wanna have to ride the bike. Now, can you ride this bike a little bit slower pace and you always have to be on the throttle at all times? No, you don't. But you can just tell that, you know, at those low RPMs, the throttle just feels a little bit mushier. And at least for the people that are really used to riding manual transmission motorcycles, you're gonna feel like, hey, I'm on a downshift, and rev it out. It feels so good to rev that thing up to 4,000, 4,500 RPM, shift it and hit the next gear. It just feels really good. This type of cam, it just feels better if that's your style of riding. And so it definitely delivers that. It's a unique power delivery on this bike when compared to your custom motor on the Fat Boy and the Breakout, and then your standard classic motor on the Heritage and the Street Bob. So a different type of rider, different type of power delivery. I can't stress that enough. It definitely translates to real world riding as far as this engine goes. The other thing I was really looking forward to riding and testing was the suspension. So they went to a straight rate spring this year as opposed to a progressive rate spring. And I just rode this thing right out of the box. I didn't change the monoshock underneath the seat there. You can adjust that, by the way. I didn't do that. Riding over railroad tracks, and there's a lot of roads around here that I've ridden hundreds of times, and so I know exactly how they feel. This handled it better than the prior model years. I would say on the big stuff, like railroad tracks, big dips in the road, this straight rate spring, and the way it's Harley-Davidson has tuned it for the 25 model year, is definitely better on the big heavy stuff. Now the little stuff in the road, you know, maybe the reflectors on the road, stuff like that, it's probably about the same. I didn't feel like it was any better at all, but the big stuff, the freeway joints that you're gonna hit at 70 miles an hour, this is gonna handle those better. And I can say that with really good confidence as well. This is a new gauge this model year. So you've got an analog speedometer, and then you have a little LCD screen at the bottom that's gonna tell you things like your RPM. You can cycle it and toggle your trip A, trip B. You have tire pressure monitoring on here. That's gonna be on that little LCD screen as well, which is a huge one for me. I'm one of these guys that has a little bit of a OCD nature about me, so I always check my tire pressure every time I ride.
So to kind of run over some of my favorite things about this bike, first and foremost is the versatility. You're getting the 6-speed transmission with one of the most powerful Harley motors ever produced in a big twin. And you're getting cruise control, you're getting the ability to add saddlebags, you're getting, you know, the ability to add a luggage rack, you're getting, you know, the most advanced rider aid package that's available on an air-cooled bike. You're getting wonderful brakes, you're getting a bike that's going to be really comfortable on the highway and a lot of fun on twisty roads, something that, you know, especially if you're not the tallest guy, you're going to be able to probably ride 2 up on pretty comfortably for a decent amount of time, especially if you get the right seat for your passenger. Obviously from the factory it comes with a solo setup that really shows off that beautiful rear fender, but there's not a lot that you're going to be limiting yourself when you choose this bike. And furthermore, there's not a lot in Harley's lineup that delivers this kind of fun and this kind of thrill while retaining that traditional Harley character. You know, the Pan Am obviously has a whole bunch of horsepower, and sometimes I hear people say like, oh, when is Harley going to stick the Rev Max into a cruiser? And despite the fact that that makes no sense considering the engine's the frame of that bike, and sticking that motor into a perimeter frame kind of defeats the purpose of it. When you buy a bike like this, you really want this character and this personality for this engine. You know, it's part of the experience, part of what makes this bike feel alive. There isn't something else in Harley's lineup that delivers this kind of thrill, in my opinion, and this kind of charisma and charm and personality other than this bike and potentially the ST as well. This motor is a gem. Not to say that the 117s and the other bikes aren't great motors, they just match the character of something like the Heritage a bit better. They're a little bit more relaxed, they're a little bit more about delivering that, you know, typical low-end grunt, whereas this thing is constantly encouraging you to twist that throttle harder and to rev this thing out and to really put that 115 odd horsepower to the ground. And that's something that it's hard to replicate, it's hard to describe on a spec sheet, but that sensation, that rawness, that thrill, when matched with something that is this practical, you know, a 5-gallon tank, wonderfully comfortable suspension, cruise control, it's really, really rare, not only in Harley's lineup, but across the motorcycle industry. There's not a lot of things that deliver what this does and offer this much practicality as well. So really, really cool. I have very few nitpicks for this bike. Obviously, having owned one before, I'm a little bit biased. Like, this definitely lines up with exactly what I like in a motorcycle. But I do have a couple of nitpicks. The new hand control design, while very functional, very clean, it's still metal. Like, they didn't cut corners in terms of the quality. Aesthetically, I'm not sure I like it as much as the previous generation. I understand the justification for the update because, you know, obviously there's more functionality in these bikes, and so they needed a new control setup. But just visually, I just felt like the old design was a little more compact, a little bit cleaner than this. Not that this is still way better than what I see in 99% of the motorcycle industry. Unfortunately, there's no big red buttons. It doesn't look like a toy or anything like that. And like I said, the housings are still metal, which still gives that feeling of quality. But just visually, I don't know. They haven't caught to my eye yet. But maybe that's something that'll change over time. And then, as much as they've retained certain things, like sometimes there's just little things that catch my eye that I don't like. Like, I know why this is here. So this cover here lets you know what gear you're in, even when the clutch is pulled in. So the transmission has an additional sensor. So, you know, it used to be that when you pulled the clutch in, because you no longer knew what RPM you were at, the bike no longer knew what gear it was in. And so that's been changed. And maybe there were a lot of people calling for that. I don't know. I haven't had customers ask me for that particular feature, but I personally probably wouldn't add that. But, you know, I don't know if that adds enough value to add an additional cover there. But I only say that because the Milwaukee-Eight is such a pretty engine that, like, anything that changes how it looks, like, I'm laser focused on. But that's honestly in some ways a testament to how beautiful the engine is that I'm like so protective of it. But other than that, I can't really think of anything. All the complaints I had about the Low Rider S previously, that didn't have a 2-in-1, that the LED taillight looked a little bit dated, that it didn't come from the factory with LED turn signals, those have all been fixed. And then we also got a bunch more power, we got updated suspension, we got additional functionality in the form of new rider aids, which is something that I'm a big fan of. I commute on my bike and I'll take every safety aid I can possibly get, you know, and that's not listing everything that was updated on the bike. So really, really impressed by the changes. Unfortunately, they're kind of making me want to buy one, and so I should probably stop talking about it. But yeah, and I didn't even mention the colors look great. They stylistically updated the bike a little bit. You've got red accents now. I love the red badge. This Iron Horse metallic is absolutely gorgeous. If you have the ability to go check it out in person, I highly recommend it. It pops in the sunlight, but it's still got that really kind of dark, evil, sinister look to it. And then of course the red accents that are on the bike as well match it well. And then gone are a lot of the bronze accents. I know a lot of guys love the bronze, but some guys were kind of turned off by the bronze accents on the bike. And so I do think that by blacking it out a little bit more, it offsets a little bit of the red. So it's not overwhelming with bronze and red and everything. So I think that visually they kind of knocked it out of the park from the original design of the bike. And I think some of the changes they made this year have kept it fresh and even improved it a little bit, especially in the lighting department. So should you buy this bike? 100%. If you have a 2024 Low Rider S, you probably don't need to run and immediately replace it with this, although you will be significantly impressed by the cam and you might run over to the parts counter and order a camshaft. But if you're someone who's still riding the Dyna train for some reason, this is probably going to change your mind at least a little bit and open your mind to the Softails. And if you're someone that just doesn't necessarily know what they're going to do in the Harley world, they're coming from a different brand or they're just getting into motorcycling and they don't want to limit themselves in terms of what they're doing on the road, this is a great option. You're going to be really comfortable on longer rides. You're going to have a lot of fun on twisty roads. You're not going to have a lot of complaints. It's a really, really well-rounded package. Honestly, Harley, you surprised me. I shouldn't be surprised because the bones you were working with were really solid, but you improved it in a way I wasn't expecting. You made a really meaningful and impactful update.
At the end of the day, Harley-Davidson has taken what's already a very, very popular mid-size performance cruiser in their Low Rider S package. They've made it even better. This is just still continues to be a wildly popular motorcycle. It's kind of the bike that a lot of different brands are chasing. They've proven this formula. They've been mastering the style over, what has it been, like almost half a century now. And so it's just kind of the culmination of a long progression of Harley-Davidson and everything they do right in an American designed cruiser. The look is right. The engine is right. Like Nick said, the beauty of the Milwaukee-Eight is perfect. V-twin, uninhibited, no plastic shrouding, everything you'd expect on a Harley-Davidson. Heads-up display on the gauges, very performance-minded and oriented. The little fairing that, once again, has become wildly popular in the club scene, the Dyna scene, whatever you want to call it. The finishes are good. I love the paint this year. We wanted to showcase the Iron Horse metallic this year. I love the fact that Harley-Davidson has gone with like a little bit of a red highlight theme throughout the bike. It's kind of like they're racing. I think that's in really good taste. My opinion, the bronze was cool, but it's kind of run its course. It was time for a change. I think it's cool they went to the black wheels this year. The seat, I always have to talk about things from a touring standpoint because I'm a touring guy, even though this bike isn't really a touring bike, but I know some people will probably try to do like long rides on it, which it will do no problem, like Nick mentioned. Not a fan of this seat, quite frankly. It's a cool shoot around town, minimalist, less is more type of a seat where it kind of blends into the rest of the bike. It doesn't stand out, and so in that respect it's really nice, but not the most comfortable seat in the world for me at least. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. We appreciate you checking out the channel. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you guys think. If you're looking for a new or used Harley-Davidson in Southern California, make sure you check us out here at Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson, where we have absolutely no added dealer markup, no prep fees, no games, no BS, no bait bikes on the website. You can calculate your out-the-door price at our dealership or MSRP. Come see us here at Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Later.